It's my pleasure this morning to introduce your keynote speaker, who is a gentleman that I've known for just over a decade now. Well, more than just over a decade now. I first met General Hyten when he was Colonel Hyten. And I don't know, John, whether you'll remember this, but I was with a group of civic leaders, Air Force civilian leaders, visiting Vandenberg Air Force Base to get an update on what was going on there and see the new launch facilities and so forth. And there was this colonel who was giving us this briefing, and I was just absolutely knocked out. I said, who is this guy? He is so smart. How can you remember all this stuff? How can you have a command of all this stuff? And how can you so confidently talk about everything that's going on in the Air Force as a colonel? Well, of course, fast forward the clock today, and Colonel Hyten is General Hyten, and he's commander of Air Force Space Command. And those of us who have known him for a while are not at all surprised by this. He is a guy who has had a number of tremendous, interesting experiences in the Air Force. And one of the things that just blows me away about John, I was at his promotion ceremony a couple of weeks ago and listening to people talk about him. And they remember when Lieutenant Hyten was the best lieutenant in the squadron, and when Captain Hyten was the best captain on the base, and when Lieutenant Colonel Hyten was the best lieutenant colonel in the command, and when Colonel Hyten, or Brigadier General Hyten, was the best brigadier general in the Pentagon. And it's really kind of humbling to hear all these people talk about John. I think the obligatory thing to say is, as commander of Air Force Space Command, he's responsible to organize, train, and equip. You've all heard those words. 40,000 men and women in about 134 different locations around the world to deliver space and cyberspace effects and mission-ready forces, and does that with great aplomb. One of the reasons I think John is going to eventually go down, and I'm going to embarrass him here a little bit because he's at the front of his command, but I'm going to predict that John's going to go down as one of the great commanders of Air Force Space Command. And that's because space is really in his DNA. He grew up in Huntsville, Alabama. Everybody who spent time in Huntsville, raise your hand. All right. Anybody here from Huntsville today? John in the back. Went to Chaffee Middle School, met Werner von Braun, and when he came into the Air Force, I think there was no question what his DNA was and what he wanted to do, and he has brought that passion with him. And in addition to that passion, tremendous intellect. I don't know how many Air Force ROTC uniforms you can count on the campus at Harvard University, but I think it's a pretty small number. And that's the program that John went through to gain his commission in the Air Force, and it's been all upward since. He's a great guy, great leader, and we're really lucky to have him here this morning. Please welcome the commander of Air Force Space Command, John Hyten.
Thanks, Elliot.
No pressure.
No pressure. Well, I'm embarrassed now. That was a way too kind introduction, but thank you very much. It's pretty neat to be here today. It's neat to be in this place. It's neat to be with people that are working the same issues that are important to me. It's a privilege to get to talk to you and tell you what I think. And basically that's what I'm going to do today. But a couple of things real quick, a couple of asides before I get into what I prepared is that Amos is not just a conference. Amos is a place, and it's a place up on Haleakala. And I got to go up there yesterday, Laura got to go up there yesterday, and to walk around. And I know there's a tour going out this Friday. Some of you are going on Wednesday. If you haven't been there, you need to go there, because it's not just a special mission and with special equipment and special people doing it, but it's a very special place on the planet. It's a very different place to be. Not only do you see the world when you look down, but you can see the heavens when you look up. And it's just a remarkable thing to be able to do. And the people there that do that mission love what they do desperately. And you ought to go visit them and say hello and thank them for what they do, and thank them for the hour and a half it takes to drive up there in the day, an hour and a half it takes to drive down at night. And you know what? I don't think any of us really feel bad for them. Second thing, I wish I could spend all week with you all this week. I really do. I wish I could spend time with the kids on Friday. That's one of my favorite things to do. It's one of the great things the Space Foundation does for us as a nation, is they get to work with teachers and kids, and they do just amazing things, and I love that. But we have to fly back tonight because Thursday is an important day for our country. Thursday is 9/11. And in Colorado Springs on 9/11, we're going to have the ceremony up in Cheyenne Mountain this time. Lots of people are coming, not just from our nation. The Minister of Defense from Canada is coming. Significant leadership from Washington is coming. We need to make sure that we remember that day, remember those that died on that day, and remember what we're doing in the world as we look back at 9/11 in 2001. So I wish I could be here with the kids on Friday. I wish I could be here with the teacher on Thursday, but Thursday's 9/11. So one thing I would ask you to do is that as you walk up to Thursday on 9/11 and you're visiting with the teachers and you're here in this beautiful place, just take a minute in the morning and remember what happened, because it's a hard thing. So, I'm going to do one other quick aside before I get into the prepared remarks, because this is the policy forum. So since it's an SSA policy forum, and yesterday when I spoke in the classified session up in the National Guard Armory, I got a lot of questions on policy. And it bugged me last night, and it bugged me this morning, because I really don't think policy is the issue. Now, I'm not going to get into detailed policy. You have two great panels coming up here later this morning with really excellent people from the State Department and others that work in that policy every day. But I was lucky enough with Mylan Pride and some others to work for the Joint Staff when we were writing the National Space Policy that President Obama signed in June of 2010. June of 2010 is not that long ago. And it is still the national space policy of this country. And the words in it are very important. And so I'm going to actually stand up here and read you the words that are in the National Space Policy. And hopefully that will set the stage for the discussions you're going to have here in a little while. But the words are very important. And I tell you what, we bled over those words, we sweated over the words. In any policy that this country produces, nobody is fully happy with what's in the policy. But in these areas, I think the words are exactly right. So let's talk about the national security piece right away. So, June 28, 2010, the United States will employ a variety of measures to help assure the use of space for all responsible parties and consistent with the inherent right of self-defense, deter others from interference or attack, defend our space systems, and contribute to the defense of allied space systems, and if deterrent fails, defeat efforts to attack them. That's what President Obama signed in 2010. That's pretty clear. I don't think there's a lot of ambiguity in that language. It says what we have to do. It says that we have an inherent right of self-defense, and implies that if we're going to defend ourselves, we have to know what the heck is going on. So you read a little bit further. The U.S. will strengthen stability in space through domestic and international measures, including improved information collection and sharing for space object collision avoidance. The key piece of that statement that we fought over significantly inside the White House was domestic and international measures. This is not a U.S. problem. This is a world problem. This is a problem that we have to engage with our allies. And in this room, I think there's 13 nations represented, and there's only a few hundred people in the room, so 13 nations and a few hundred people is a significant piece of the puzzle. And that is because it is an international problem. You know, I never want to go to war in space. War in space is bad for the United States. It's bad for humanity. It's bad for the international community. It creates a mess that we may never recover from. But the only way to avoid war, it's the oldest axiom in the history of warfare, is to prepare for war. To avoid war, prepare for war. To go back to the Roman legions, go back to Washington, go back all the way. You have to be able to fight the war that an enemy would bring on to you, and do it in such a way that you would win that war and make it so that enemy does not want to bring war upon you. So you go back. If deterrence fails, defeat efforts to attack them. That's what our policy says. That's what we have to do. We have to facilitate new market opportunities for U.S. commercial capabilities in space. You know, the President told us in 2010 that we have to look out for different and new ways to leverage our commercial capabilities. I got questions yesterday about hosted payloads and how are we going to... There is actually not an impediment in policy about doing that. The only impediment we have in that area is ourselves. We get in our own way. We have our own prejudices and our own biases and our own cultural experiences that say, no, I can't really do that. But the policy of the United States tells us we're supposed to go do that. And for whatever reason, we shy away from those kind of things and we get afraid of them. And then we have, I'm going to use the word lovingly here, but we have bureaucrats in Washington that create these little bitty fiefdoms about, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that. Pull out the National Space Policy and read what it says. It is enabling. And then identify areas for international cooperation, including space surveillance. Maintain and integrate space surveillance, intel, and other information. This is direction of the Secretary of Defense. You must maintain and integrate space surveillance, intel, and other information to develop accurate and timely space situational awareness for national security, as well as commercial and foreign space operations. The Secretary of Defense, my boss's boss, that's what he is supposed to do by the National Space Policy. It tells us we have to reach out to the commercial sector. It tells us we have to do SSA for commercial and foreign space operations. It's all right there in the policy, and yet we shy away. And I get questions all the time is, why is it we have problems with the policy? We actually don't have problems with the policy. The policy is enabling. Our own biases get in the way. So that's a little bit of a diversion from what I wanted to talk about today, but since this is a space policy forum, and you're going to have some great panels, I would encourage you to listen carefully as the panelists talk later about how they talk about policy, because that is the national space policy. And when it comes to space, still today, that overrides every other element of our government, because the President of the United States signed that to all the executive departments and said, go do this. I think it's part of our nature that we then start the debate. The debate ended on June 28, 2010 for this administration, and it's enabling. So we ought to go do it, but we get in our own way. All right. What I really wanted to talk about today is the progress that we've made in SSA and how much more we have to do. So yesterday in the classified section, I talked about why. Why are we doing certain things in space? Why are we doing certain things with SSA? Today I want to talk about the what, because the what is pretty fascinating when you think about it. And as you work in your various elements of this business, I would say that you're all involved in bits and pieces of this, but it's real easy for you to miss this big picture of what's going on. Because this last year has been maybe one of the most remarkable years in the last 20 or 30 years in terms of what we've done in SSA. It really is. And the nation and the Department of Defense in particular has made a huge commitment to SSA in a lot of different ways, and you don't really see it until you start putting it all together. So I'm going to start from the ground up, and I'm just going to work from the ground up. So just if you go up to the top of Haleakala sometime this week, and if you've been there before, you understand that that building just a few years ago, those buildings were kind of falling apart. It was. But in the last few years, the United States Department of Defense, mostly through Air Force Research Laboratory, has spent almost $50 million upgrading that facility and that capability. Why? Because if we didn't do it, it was going to die, because it would become unsustainable. And we wouldn't be able to take enough money from the Treasury and dump it down the barrel and try to figure out how to get there. You had to get it up to a modern, digital, supportable capability in order to make that fly. But at the same time, we also upgraded the connectivity that we have across the globe. We also upgraded geodes and the geodes connectivity that we have there. we integrated geodes with the other telescopes on top of the mountain. So somebody, after this is over, this is a completely random thought, but geodes, well, what's geode stand for? It's a ground-based electro-optical deep space surveillance system, right? So what's the second D in geodes for? I really don't know. It's GEODDS. Ground-based electro-optical deep space surveillance. I only see one D. I've never figured that out. So deep space is, but I'm just curious. So I have no idea what that means. So it's worth a quarter to somebody in here if you can figure that out and tell me what that is, because I pay a quarter for good news and I don't pay quarters very often. But geodes across the world, in Diego and Socorro, they've been upgraded to kind of look out. And geodes is basically the big engine that tracks dots in geo. That's really the mission of that capability. And so that's the engine that drives the train, so to speak. We've upgraded our radars. We've upgraded the early warning radars, both coasts and overseas, along with Missile Defense Agency, to the upgraded early warning radar system. Those radars were really upgraded for missile defense capabilities. But what happens when you upgrade a radar? A radar that looks out at space. You can see a lot better things in space. It's just the nature of it. One of the things we try to do when we're working with the Missile Defense Agency is we try not to get in their way. Because every time we get in their way, we slow down their progress. And what you really want is you just really want them to deliver a capability. If they upgrade the power on a radar, if they upgrade the capabilities on a radar, if they deliver a system in space that does missile defense, well, God forbid we ever have to deploy that system for missile defense, because that means the United States is under attack. But the rest of the time, we can use that radar or that satellite or whatever it is to look out at the heavens and see amazing things. So the most important thing for us in Air Force Space Command to do is be cheerleaders for missile defense and not try to drive our requirements into their system. Just build those capabilities. And we have. They've built the UEWRs, and they're spectacular capabilities, and we're getting much better information. We're doing a service life extension program at Eglin. We're moving a C-band radar from Antigua in the Atlantic all the way to Western Australia. It's there. The National Guard is out there right now working with the Australians to install that C-band radar. That C-band radar is going to be in a very important point on the globe, because if you look at our worldwide network of capabilities, you see a big hole in that part of the world. Hole east-west and north-south, right there. So we're putting that C-band radar as the first instantiation of a capability in Western Australia. It's going to be important, but that's just tickling the surface, because DARPA has built one of the greatest telescopes built in recent years, and they put it in New Mexico, the Space Surveillance Telescope. And it is a remarkable piece of engineering and technical achievement. And it can look out at GEO and see some amazing things that we can't see with other capabilities. And so we've decided to take that radar apart and ship it to Western Australia and put it there, because that's where the real hole is. And so in the not too distant future, we'll have that radar moved, or I mean that telescope moved to Western Australia. A remarkable capability that will add to our ability to see things. A year ago, when General Shelton spoke to you, I think he spoke via VTC, he told you that he didn't know whether the space fence was going to make it or not. The space fence was kind of on the chopping block. We didn't know whether it was going to be supported or not. The space fence is critical for our ability to understand, especially debris, but understand anything in low Earth orbit. It is a key piece of the puzzle for our entire architecture, because that is the fill of the low Earth orbit piece that we need. And we're going to put it in Kwajalein. We're going to operate it through Huntsville, because the Army has the facilities already out there that hook up to Huntsville, so it's real easy for us to hook back through Huntsville and get that kind of information. But that space fence, we didn't know what was going to make it, but we made the case. The Department of Defense agreed with that case, and now we had contract award this summer for Lockheed Martin to start building the space fence in Kwajalein, and by 2018, we'll have one of the most incredible radars in the world in Kwajalein, which is a great place for it, looking out and tracking objects in LEO. One of the scary parts about that, though, is that when we put that radar out there, you know, how many times over the last 5 years have you heard somebody like me stand up and said, yes, and we're tracking 22,000 objects in space this year, debris objects down. When the space fence exists, somebody like me will be standing up and saying, and today we're tracking 250,000 objects, and most of those we'll be tracking in LEO because the space fence will see them. Now, we need to know where that stuff is, but part of me is kind of fat, dumb, and happy that I don't know where those other 200,000 objects are. Because when we know where those, because we're moving satellites 3 or 4 times a month to get out of the way of debris that we can see now. Holy cow, when we actually know where all that debris is, that's going to be an interesting challenge. But that what also tells you is that we have to do business a different way in the space fence area and the way we do space surveillance. We can't do it the way we've been doing it. I don't think the catalog that we currently have works effectively with a space fence. It does not. We have too much information in the catalog because what every space operator that's here in the room and any space operator in the world, doesn't matter whether they're European, Chinese, Russian, American, what you want to know is you want to know where the rock is in space that's going to hit you. You don't care that it was launched out of Kourou, you don't care that it was launched out of, you just want to know where that rock is and it's going to hit you. But we have so much information that we put in the catalog, so many things that track back, that it creates policy issues for us to work about what we release. Well, go back to the National Space Policy. We're supposed to provide a safe environment. If we have 250,000 objects that we know, then we're supposed to provide that safe and secure environment to foreign and commercial space operators as well as the United States. Then we got to figure out a different way to do that. And the space fence is going to force us into that. But it's not like you wait to 2018 and then you kind of just fall into it. We better start working it right now. SBSS is doing great things, the Space-Based Space Surveillance System. One satellite on orbit looking out at GEO provides all-weather access to the GEO belt over a certain period of time that I can't talk about in this room because it's a classified number, but it basically fills the void that geods can't get because geods can be weathered out, whether you're on Haleakala or you're in New Mexico or in Diego. Geods is weathered out fairly frequently. So you need an all-weather capability. Space-based space surveillance defines that. In the last year, we've also defined what we believe is the next generation of the space-based space surveillance system. The next SBSS follow-on is actually structured now to be 3 satellites is what we're looking at in an equatorial orbit, low Earth orbit, that are basically circling the globe at the equator and looking out to GEO. Because what do we need from SBSS that we really can't get anywhere else? We need that real-time all-weather access. And we need it on a frequent basis. You can get that from an equatorial orbit in LEO looking up. It's actually pretty simple. You don't need a big satellite in order to do that. You can do that with small satellites. You can do that with fairly affordable, because then the last piece, if you look at our requirements in space situational awareness are detect, track, ID, characterize, threat warning, and data integration. So what have I talked about so far? I've talked about the first 1, 2, 3, but I didn't talk about characterize and threat warning. So characterize and threat warning was a gap. So in February this year, General Shelton announced at AFA Orlando that we were going to launch this summer, and we did in July, 2 Geosynchronous Space Situational Awareness Program satellites, GSAP. That satellite, those 2 satellites are right now going through checkout. It's going very well, and they'll be able to circumnavigate the geosynchronous orbit, and they'll be able to rendezvous and, if necessary, do proximity operations around any object in geosynchronous orbit, characterize what that is, make sure we understand. If we have a problem with our satellites, it can go up and look at it and figure out what the problem is. If we're concerned about a potential threat in GEO, it can go up and take a look at that, and we will know what is going on there. And everybody in the world will know that we know what's going on in geosynchronous orbit. It will not be possible to hide from the United States of America in that orbit right now. That's a critical piece of the equation. And then Dave Hardy and AFRL and General Maciel and those folks have got some amazing lab programs going on right now. ANGELS, really very cool program, but I can never remember the acronym, so I had to write it down. Autonomous Navigation and Guidance Experiment for Low Space. Is that right? No. Yeah, I think that's right, ANGELS. autonomous navigation guidance experiment for low space. It's your program, Dave. You should know what it is. But it's got some amazing capabilities on it. It's going to be doing some very interesting things. Will enable a lot of capabilities that we have again in the future, because the key words in Angels are autonomous navigation and guidance. That we don't really do in the world right now. So we're building a satellite that will actually test out autonomous navigation and guidance, where you can actually give it a command and just let it go, and it will do certain things. It can go anywhere, almost do anything you tell it to, and it can do it autonomously. That's a pretty remarkable achievement. They're also putting huge capabilities on the ground, not just on Maui, but at Starfire and in New Mexico and a number of different places. They're doing great technology work on the ground. So you combine this all together, and you think about what I just talked about, and every one of you that works in each one of those programs that I just talked about, congratulations and thank you, and it's really amazing what you're doing. But maybe the most amazing thing is when you lump it all together and you think about what I just described in terms of data. Because the one thing that we always forget in this mission area is it's really about the data. And the last thing I want to talk about today is what we're going to do with the data. Because the data from all those capabilities, the data from the space fence, the 200,000 tracks a day that we get from the space fence, the tracks that we get from every one of those capabilities, all the tracks we get from SBSS follow-on, all the tracks we get from the ground-based architecture, all the capabilities that we have, because we want to reach out to the commercial sector and take their positional information that they have from their satellites. We want to reach out to the Satellite Data Association that knows where all the commercial satellites are, bring that kind of information in. We want to work with that international community so we understand where those pieces are, but there's got to be a place where the data all comes together. And the place where the data all comes together is the JSPOC, the Joint Space Operations Center at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, commanded by Lieutenant General Jay Raymond. I can tell you Lieutenant General Raymond gets it. He gets that it's all about the data. And he's excited about what we're doing with JMS. So most of you that I see a lot of people that have known me for a long time, and they've heard me multiple occasions beat up the JMS program frequently. I beat up the JMS program when I was in the Pentagon. I beat up the JMS program when I was in the headquarters. I beat up the JMS program as the vice commander. Why do I always beat that program up? Arnie, I'm sorry, because it was your program for a while, but I beat that program up because it's the key to the kingdom. If you don't have a place to ship all that data, if you can't take all the data and use all the data that's out there, all the things I just talked about are a complete waste of time and energy and money. It's all about the data. So the JMS program is the key. And so, you know, the acquisition bureaucracy is very difficult for an IT program to go through. And it is actually the biggest impediment. But we have come up with a program, and we've come up with a way to work requirements with the operator in California and the developer in Los Angeles. And they're working arm in arm, hand in hand, working through the acquisition morass in Washington and somehow delivering capability. So I'm going to take a risk right now, and I'll ask you to throw up a chart. It's the only chart I'm going to throw up today. So if you could add this chart. So Arnie, you've seen this chart before. So, and actually you can read it, which I was concerned that you wouldn't be able to read. Laura, can you read it? Yeah, okay, good. Just checking. So look, this is what we're going to deliver in the next 2 years in the JSPOC mission system. So if you look at that capability, we've already delivered increment 1 and accepted it. So this is all in increment 2. So increment 2, the next big piece is the infrastructure, finishing out the infrastructure. It'll be done here in just a couple months. We're already going through test on that. It'll be done here in a couple months. We get security, we get situation awareness from launch. We get all of those capabilities that you see right there. Then Service Pack 9, a critical element, because Service Pack 9, we start getting off of SPADOC. Because right now, all the way up to Service Pack 7, and just so you know, the way the deliveries work is that odd numbers are capabilities and even numbers are basically fixes. So we just go odd, even, but every odd number brings a certain capability. And so all the way up to Service Pack 8, we're still running on the Space Defense Operations Center, the SPADOC database. We're still running on that ancient engine that can't take data from anywhere unless it's one of ours. It's just horrible. So even though we have JMS running at Vandenberg right now, it's still running on the SPADOC engine until we get to Service Pack 9, and then we start getting off of that. And you start getting the capabilities that we need to do automated in Service Pack 9. And then Service Pack 11, you start being able to process events that happen, which is important. Deorbits, reentries, launches, UCTs, metrics for how we maintain the catalog, how good it is, space object identification, and then we get some advanced capabilities, training, tasking. We get commercial capabilities in 13, and we get high SAP connectivity as well. So Service Pack 9's late 2015, Service Pack 11, the middle of 2016, Service Pack 13 by late 2016. So basically 2.5 years from now, we'll have delivered those capabilities. Given where we were 5 years ago, that's remarkable. If anybody had told me that we could figure out a way to get through the acquisition process and get all the way out to deliver those capabilities, I'd have said they were fooling, because I'd failed so many times tilting at that windmill that I just didn't think we could figure out how to get through. But we did. And the folks in Los Angeles and Vandenberg and the folks that are involved in that with our commercial partners as well are delivering those capabilities, and it's awesome. It's spectacular. And it's incomplete. Because you look at that chart, you look at this chart right here, what do you see and what is missing? What you see is knowledge. All the way through, you see knowledge. You're providing the commander, the Joint Force Commander for space, knowledge about what is going on in space. In many cases, you're providing near real-time knowledge about what's happening. But what's missing? This is a command and control system. What's missing is action. Because a command and control system is about action. It's not about knowledge. And what we're building is a command and control system that will deliver exquisite knowledge to the commander, but the only action that can take place will happen in between his two ears. Fortunately, he's a very bright officer, a great space leader, and he will be able to do some good things, but if you actually get into a sticky situation with whoever, without the real ability to command and control forces and do things, it's not sufficient. That's the problem with JMS right now. That's the problem with our command and control capabilities. And I briefly told the story yesterday, and I'll repeat it again for effect today, is that I was the Director of Space Forces in Theater in 2006. One of the great experiences of my professional career, because I got to employ the capabilities and work with people that I never thought I'd work with. I got to do things that I trained for my entire life and make it real. And it was difficult and it was hard, and I saw things that I never really wanted to see, but it was critically important. But one of the most amazing things is when I walked into the CAOC, the Combined Air Operations Center, for the first time, two things blew me away. Number one was the integration of the Allies. Because I walked in and my boss was Air Commodore Swan, UK, RAF. We had Australians, we had Japanese, we had French, we had the entire coalition partners working in that CAOC. And I worked in a space vault. I mean, Air Commodore Swan could walk into the vault anytime he wanted and ask me what the heck was going on and why. And what, if we needed something, how do we get that right now? And then when I walked onto the bridge over the ops floor, what I saw was a command and control system that drove real-time intelligence, real-time information from all of the classified systems that we have in the United States and from all of our allies into a single picture where the commander could look at that picture, see what was happening, and then he knew where his forces were because he had that picture as well. He could say, I need 2 F-16s and I need a pave pause and I need whatever it is to go after that mission right now, and he can execute it right now. That's real-time command and control. At the end of Service Pack 13, we don't have real-time command and control. We have built the knowledge base that we have, but we have to, at the same time, over the next couple of years, get through our heads that it's all about the data. It's not all about the sensors. The data is the key piece of the puzzle. And if we can take that data and put it into this knowledge format and then deliver to the commander, the Joint Functional Component Commander for Space, the ability to make decisions and do things, then we will be able to enable him to do what the National Space Policy says. And that is defend ourselves if we're threatened and avoid war in space. Because that's fundamentally what the policy tells us to do. The policy is enabling, it gives us right there, we have the capabilities come on, we have all these sensors that are coming on, but unless we put them all together and integrate it and provide real operational focus, you can't get there from here. So, I just beat up JMS again, didn't I? Sorry, Arnie. It really is remarkable what you guys did. It really is remarkable the direction that we're on, but it's incomplete. And we have to complete it. We have to complete it in the next few years. It is our responsibility to do that. And everybody in this room is a piece of that puzzle, because either you're producing data or trying to figure out how to take that data and provide capabilities. Everybody in this room is doing that. If you're an international partner, you're trying to figure out how to partner with the United States on using that capability. You're trying to figure out how to work in the Joint Space Operations Center. All of those things, everybody in here is a part of the solution. And hopefully you understand what that is right now. And the other thing is that policy is not in the way. The answer is right there in front of us. All we really have to do is take it. Just take it. We have to get out of our own way and do it. So, that's all I have today. Thank you very much for listening. I very much appreciate it, but I'm available to take questions. I think, Elliot, you're going to be the moderator, right? Thank you very much.
We do have a few minutes for questions, and there are slips of papers at your tables if you have a question you'd like to write down and send up to us. Looks like we've got one already. My question is whether anybody Googled geodes while we were talking and figured out where that second D stands for. Nobody can find it. A couple of people Google it, and they can't find it either, sir. So
what's the second
it's not
D?
there.
It's not there, right?
They've deleted
So
it.
where did that come from? There's got to be a story there somewhere. Isn't it? You know, it's classified. You know?
All right, sir, we have a question. With the proliferation of expensive yet capable COTS optical systems, how do you envision your organization's approach to data sharing will change?
I missed the last part. Let me get closer. So
Okay. How do you envision AFSpace's approach to data sharing will change with the proliferation of inexpensive yet capable COTS optical systems?
So the answer there is the last part of the talk this morning. The answer there is it's about the data. Because what I want to do, and the vision that I've given to Air Force Space Command, and I gave it to the commanders at the first commander's call that week I took command, is that it really is all about the data. Because ultimately what I want to be able for this command to do is take data from anywhere and put it into the engine at the JSPOC. I want it to come from commercial sources, international sources. I want it to come from our own capabilities. I want it to come from missile defense. I want it to come from tactical radars. I want it to come from TPY-2s. I want it to come from everywhere. Because, you know, if you think about it, it's data. For gosh sakes, it's data. What year is this? 2014? Arnie, you probably can figure that one out. 2014, right? Has anybody looked around? We have pretty decent information technology these days, okay? Why is it so hard to figure out that I should be able to take data from any place on the planet that I can get it and put it in the system, and the system will be so good it will be able to throw away the bad data because it will be able to figure out that this is bad data? We do that in almost every business area that we have in the world. And we do that in the financial system. We do that in things that are critically important to the world. But somehow, in this area, data that comes off of a Raven telescope or data that comes off of a commercial satellite operator, we can't use it because it's not the right kind of data. I'm sorry, Laura, but ladies and gentlemen, that's just stupid. All right, it really is. It's stupid. We need to take advantage of all the data that's out there, including the commercial stuff, and use it. And that's what we're going to press ahead. And, you know, everybody in the command, everybody in Air Force Base Command is going to understand that, and we're going to go after the data hard. That's the key piece of the puzzle.
Sir, it says here today we see a lot of discussion on resiliency, say that 3 times fast, mostly centered on disaggregation, but what are your views on the other tenets of resiliency?
Okay, so that's going to set me off. So I apologize in advance.
Is that your question, Laura?
No. Yep, so my wife's concerned now because she knows how I get when I get set off. But the reason that question is so upsetting to me is that, and so I apologize for ever asking, because it's a really good question. It's a really good question, but it's upsetting because resilience is a warfighting term. It's not a metric, okay? It's not something that you can put a number on. Resilience is not disaggregation. Resilience is the ability of a military capability to fight through a threat and continue to operate. Not necessarily survive, not everything survives, but you have to continue to operate as you come through. Our entire United States Army is a resilient warfighting capability. So what is the resilience number you put on the United States Army? The 1,800 F-35s we're going to build are a resilient warfighting force in the air. Why are we building 1,800? It's the best airplane in the world. Because we know if we get in a threat environment, we're going to lose some. We're going to be able to fight through that threat. So resilience in space is a warfighting term. So resilience comes from numbers. Numbers is an advantage. That's what disaggregation is. It creates more targets for an adversary to worry about. But that's not everything it is. It's defense, it's offense, it's all the pieces that come in. It's ground forces, it's air forces. Because if somebody does something bad to the United States in space that really impact this nation, do you think we're just going to sit around and go, oh my gosh, we should have had a more resilient architecture. We should have disaggregated one more satellite. No, because we have a United States Army and a United States Air Force and a Marine Corps and a Navy that we go out and we reach and we do things to people that say, don't do that to us. We need to have space capabilities that do things to people that say, don't do that to us. That's part of resilience. Resilience is just a warfighting term that we have to think about. Because, you know, one of my favorite things to say is that at my core, I'm an American airman. My mission is to fly, fight, and win in 3 warfighting domains: air, space, and cyberspace. 2 of those warfighting domains are in Air Force Base Command. The one we're talking about today is space. A warfighting domain has to have a resilient architecture. It's really that simple. So I apologize for venting a little bit, but thanks for the question, because I like to vent on that subject.
Okay, sir, we've got some great questions here, but we really only have time for one more, so this will be your wrap-up question, and it's a good one. In 1998, 14th Air Force held a Tiger team to answer for General Howell Estes the question, how would we know we're under attack in space? 15 years later, we're making progress on that one. What is your big question?
What is my big question? Oh, man, I thought it was going to be easy.
Not for your last question. You don't care.
Oh, that, you know, so what is my big question? My big question is, can we do enough in the United States over the next few years to avoid warfare in space? That's my big question. Because I tell you what, we as a nation should want to avoid that. We should. But it's not going to happen by us sitting on our hands and watching the world go by. We have to do things. Because I tell you what, I did go to Roger B. Chaffee Elementary School, and I did go to Virgil I. Grissom High School in Huntsville, Alabama. 2 Apollo 1 astronauts that dared to dream and dared to risk their lives to travel into space. I got to meet von Braun, who designed and built the Saturn V, who energized my imagination and wanted me to go out and do great things in space. I want my kids and my kids' kids to be able to look out at the heavens and say, I would like to go there. And if we destroy the space environment, we will not be able to do that. But I wear a uniform to prevent those kind of things from happening. And if it does happen, we have to be able to do something about it. Our national policy tells us that. So the question is will my command and will this nation do enough in the next few years to avoid that situation? So that was a really hard, great question. Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, sir. Thank you.